see people move forward as one nation, regardless of how they see it, in different outlooks and different ways. But we're one people and we're one nation.
In the early hours of May 25th, 1991, Sinn Féin councillor Eddie Fullerton was assassinated at his home in Buncrana, County Donegal. A well-respected member of the community, having been an elected representative since 1979. While the death of Eddie sent shockwaves across Donegal and further afield, it was part of a long-running and systematic campaign to censor Sinn Féin activists. Born on the 26th of March 1935, Eddie, the eldest of 20, was a gifted footballer and boxer. Like many of his generation, Eddie, at 18 years of age, moved to Scotland in search of work. Having worked in the tunnels for 2 years, he then moved to Birmingham, England, where he met and married his wife Dinah, and they had 6 children. Eddie, Dinah and their family returned to live in Buncrana in the mid-1970s.
Eddie was my brother, my oldest brother. There were 20 in the family. I'm the 17th in the family. Very proud to say that I am a sister of Eddie's. Eddie was born in Cllr. The house that we were all born in was 300 years old. He was born to Johnny and Mary Fullerton. The same homestead. Tip O'Neill's grandmother was born and reared in the same homestead as Eddie was born. Well, my dad was a Republican and so he was an outlook person at the time with the old IRA. And but Eddie didn't get involved really in that till he went to England. But while Eddie was being brought up when his younger life, at home he was all into sport. He would set up boxing clubs and football, mad about football, and he would bring them all home, and he'd have a boxing club in Cllr, and he'd bring all the youth around to train as boxers, and he would have football every Sunday and during the week. But Mum says he allowed all the football gear to be left, that she had to wash them and dry them to them ready the next time for all the team, and then she would have to make maybe about 10 scones to feed them. And he was really into sport, and he wanted everybody, any youth, brought with him. He was all into youth with sport. So then he worked with my father. My father was self-employed. He was a turf merchant, and also he did wood. There were no such thing as coal them days. So they supplied the bakeries and the forts with turf and wood. So they cut down trees with a bow saw. There were no chainsaws. So Eddie was very much with my dad, on doing all that and driving the lorry. I would say dairy all around, and he's shown everywhere. Then he worked in Gorey Quarry then for a while, and he made roads up to my home place in Filban, a place called Filban. So he made that road with a horse and cart. The lorry was too busy with the turf, so he had to yoke the horse and cart that with cart the stones with the horse and cart. And then he decided at 18 to leave because money was better, as he thought, in Scotland. So he went off to Scotland for a while and then down into England.
I met Eddie in 1956. I was introduced to him by my sister. He used to lodge in my sister's house, and she set up a blind date for us, and we went to see Cllr Rock. And Cllr Rock, Elvis Presley, he was something else. Everybody, all the young ones, was all up in the aisles jiving and whatnot. Eddie wasn't a bit impressed. He said, there's no call for that at all. And I remember saying he's got to go. It's not what I want. Anyway, me and my cousin, it was a double date, me and my cousin then, we pretended we were going to the toilet, and we went to the back of the cinema, and we were driving like mad up the back of the cinema, and we decided we'd ditch them and just leave them in the cinema. And we come outside, and when we come outside, the two of them was outside. So that was, we had to stay with them then. They left us home, but that was the end of the blind date. So nothing then occurred for about six or 7 weeks then, and we got together again through my sister. So from there then, it took off then, our romance took off then to a point. So anyway, we were together for 2 years when we got married in 1958. Well, after we got married, we was married about a year when Eddie bought our first house.
I remember Dad used to bring home things that he thought would entertain us from his work, like a railway. And he put up a railway in the garden that we played on, because there's this thing on, you pushed up and down, and we jumped on it and pushed it up and down. Do you know that you see them in mines? And that's one of my big memories. You know, he made a sand pit, he made all sorts of things for us. And so it was just a big happy house, always full of people. And people coming from Ireland all of the time. I always felt Irish in my Englishness, if that makes sense. I remember Dad had these weights that he used to exercise to all of the time, and he bought this 2-reel tape machine, and he'd just sit with Irish songbooks recording into the wee hours of the morning into his voice that I thought was awful, screechy, you know, but it's all of these Irish songs. He loved to record them and hear himself. He didn't drink and go to the pubs like everybody else, so he spent time at home when he came home recording into this tape.
Eventually, Eddie's started with his Amphib block. He got into selling Amphib blocks, and he was a keep fit fanatic and into boxing. And his wish was always to get back to Ireland and live in Ireland. And eventually in 1975, Eddie was back here in Ireland. I joined him in July of 1975.
I believe the first time I met Eddie was at a Cllr meeting. At that time in the 70s, our Cllr meetings would always be held in Balbafay, and talking to him after the Cllr meeting. Eddie, of course, had been active in Sinn Féin in Birmingham before he came home, and he was anxious to start selling and fubbling, which became a huge thing for Eddie, and that he developed a system where he covered all of Inishowen over the weekend, from the Friday night through the Saturday and through Sunday, going around all of the Inishowen Peninsula selling the paper.
And from that, Eddie was just so busy. He was never at home. He was always out doing one thing or another for the community. And the people in his community meant so much to him. And I kind of just took a back seat because I understood him. I knew where he was coming from, you know. And listening to him about the history of Ireland, you know, which was terrible. And I was quite happy then just to do my job in the house, rear the family and let Eddie do what he could do.
In 1976, as the conflict in the north was erupting and the British government were colluding with loyalist gangs, the government in Dublin tightened Section 31 of the Broadcasting Act to bar Republicans from the airwaves. These actions also led to the demonisation and isolation of Sinn Féin representatives on council. Republican activists like Eddie broke through the censorship with ingenuity. Up until his murder, he was the largest seller of An Phoblacht in Ireland. Eddie was never deterred by the many obstacles encountered and continued to work hard, delivering for the people of Inishowen and Donegal. Then in 1979, and against all odds, Eddie was elected as the first Sinn Féin councillor to Donegal County Council since 1920.
We wanted an organiser in each of the electoral areas, and Inishowen then was one electoral area. So Eddie had the responsibility of organising and trying to build the party in the Inishowen area. And he was very, very good at it. He was very enthusiastic, and he developed it to the point when he stood in the 79 election. He was elected the first councillor, Sinn Féin councillor in this era to be elected to the Donegal County Council.
Well, I met Eddie on the first day that the council met after the 79 election. We were both elected on that day, and for some reason I built up a very strong personal relationship with him, and I always admired Eddie because whatever about his politics, that didn't make any difference as far as I was concerned. When Eddie came into the council chamber, he was interested in motions that were relevant to the people of the Buncrana electoral area. And I admired him for that, and both himself and Liam, they work well together, they work well with the other councillors, and quite honestly, he was a good public representative.
And then when he come here to Ireland, he was selling An Phoblachts, and he sold 300 An Phoblachts in the week, which is the biggest sale ever, you know, that anybody could sell. And whether you had money, or whether you believed, or whether you didn't believe, he was there to hand it out. And it was his only way of getting the word through, because there was no radio for Sinn Féin, and there was definitely the one write nothing up in the paper. The Derry Journal was the only one that really would write his stories when he went into the council.
Well, Eddie used to come into the Derry Journal office on a Thursday evening, and he totally disrupted the whole place. He literally would go chat to one reporter and then chat to another reporter. Now, the Journal back then was a very, very busy paper, and there was a lot going on, as you know well, between the Troubles and so on. But when Eddie would come on, all work would stop because he would entertain the whole lot. And sometimes, literally, I used to have to go out and say to Eddie to kindly leave, though I didn't use those words, to leave the building. He was an unbelievable personality. I remember as well, he used to keep saying he was going to go to Rockhall and plant a flag there to claim Rockhall for Ireland for all the oil rights and all this. And we used to refer to him as Rockhall in the building. So he was that sort of guy. But
he was a big favourite at Ardèche, you know. And I remember one time he was up speaking, and he had overstretched his time, and it might have been Sean McManus. I don't want to do Sean McManus at the service, but Sean might have been the chair, and Sean was trying to get Eddie to, and Eddie wouldn't budge. Eddie he had a speech to make, and so finally, after Sean had given numerous warnings, Eddie turned to him and said, "Look, I had to travel X amount of miles, hundreds of miles to get here, and that wasn't counting the roundabouts. So I'm going to have my speak." And that was the nature of him. He was colourful and larger than life type of a person. I think it was Eddie himself told me now, hopefully I'm not misremembering, that he was born on the side of a field. His mother was pregnant with him and she was hoking tatties. She was out helping with the potatoes, and she felt her time coming close, and she sent, it might have been her husband, but she sent someone off to get somebody, and while he was away she gave birth to Eddie in the side of the field in the ditch.
Well, and Cllr Casu Mihin agus Eddie le Céile be a rash a wad a rash a milin Niki Shaachtas the daw agus fi an drochur hennig me go bunkrana an Shachran agus kaif me coj moi tamil and shin agus Lalanan tamil shin roi vi me rag or Casu Eddie Ormsa. I came to Bunkrana in the early 70s, and that's the first time I came in contact with Eddie. Unfortunately, I came because I was on the run, and I joined another number of activists who were out here also, some long before I came. And in that time, I became acquainted with Eddie.
So he was a person that he foreseen a lot, before his time. Even when he was going to school, well, I don't remember when he was going to school, but I heard loads of stories my mum and dad would tell me about when he was at school. I think he wasn't even 13 when the teacher brought him back to my mum and said to my mum, this boy here, he says, I don't know what I'm going to do with him, because he's even teaching me stuff. And he says, he knows more, he says, than the ones that's going to St. Colum's College in Derry. So he says, I don't know what you're going to do with him, or I don't know, what I'm going to do with him. He says, he's a way beyond his time. Yeah. So it was only when he got a bit older that my mum realised he was beyond the time. And a lot of times she thought, when he would say things to my mum and dad, where is he thinking about this? This is impossible. But now we realise his foreseeing was wider than we were aware of.
It's only since I became involved in local, say, constitutional politics that I realised that Eddie was well ahead of his time. Like he knew what we had to be doing. He knew that we needed to be interacting with people and trying to build a movement that we could bring along with us. And that clearly came to fruition when Eddie was elected firstly as a town councillor, but then afterwards as a Donegal County councillor, and he was on his own. He fought a lone battle in that chamber for a very long time, and I'm sure it was a fairly hostile place for Sinn Féiners.
What I remarked about him, he did a lot of research when he spoke in the council, and Eddie was very, very well read. And of course, when I was chairman after the 85 election, and Eddie had a very strategic seat. His seat was just below the chair of the council, and he was forever wanting to intervene, whatever the subject was, of a county nature, in addition to the Bunkrana electoral area.
There's an iconic photograph of Eddie Fullerton exiting out the gates of Leinster House. He was there as part of a delegation from Donegal County Council to make representations on behalf of the council. And the minister, I think a Labour minister called Kavanagh, had refused to meet with the delegation or to continue the meeting with them when he discovered that Eddie was there. And as Eddie described afterwards, he withdrew because he wanted the issues presented to the minister, even if that meant him having to leave to do so. And he was a very formidable champion of the rights of his own constituents and wouldn't have easily allowed himself or them to be disenfranchised. So the photograph And incidentally, there's another photograph of John Joe, John Joe McGarrell, who was chair of Leitrim Council, also exiting out the gates of Leinster House. But the one of Eddie is, I suppose, in many ways a little photographic reminder of exclusion, and also, if I may say so, of how it doesn't work.
He was way ahead of us. We would go into Cllr meetings, and it would be common meetings, Easter lily sales at Easter, a bit of protesting here or there. Eddie always brought in issues and ideas. He would talk about forestation. He would talk about what would happen in third world countries. He would talk the whole international part of his, politics. And we're talking about East Timor, and you wondered where the hell is East Timor? You had to go and look at a map or an atlas to find out where it was. He was well ahead of his time as regards politics. And you could see that even if you look at his motions that he spoke at Ardeshna, it's you could see he was well ahead of us, like forestry, agriculture, fishing, all of that stuff. And then when he stood then as an EU, all of that come just naturally to him, because he'd already been talking about it for years, So no, he wasn't just a Donegal councillor. He had a worldview, and his politics were very broad and wide. And as I say, he knew what he was talking about.
He was terrible well known. I remember being on a canvas just outside Burt with him, a small row of cottages just above the GAA pitch, and everybody seemed to know him, and he seemed to know everybody, was the thing that struck me at the time.
Thank you, Seamus. Now we have Councillor Eddie Fullerton, Urban Councillor and Donegal County Councillor.
Chairman, Reverend Fathers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I'd like to say that being invited here to me is a great honour on a day like this. And to hear Father Mullen and Pat Borer saying that it's up to the standards of Parkhead is something else. Something else for the people of Cockhull and the surrounding community. To think that we would have a football pitch on a par with Parkhead. Ladies and gentlemen, I think it's the success of Cockhull is a wonderful achievement, not only just to Cockhull Celtic, but to the whole community. The cooperative effort, the struggle in getting this pitch. I'm sure many of you have seen the photographs of this, or seen the floods indeed about 2 or 3 years ago, and seen that there with nothing only water and rock and stone and muck. And the determination and the dedication of the workers and the organisers and the people and getting it and leaving it like what it is today is no doubt a wonderful achievement. I remember when I first set out to play football, we didn't have a football. No, we didn't even have a pair of boots. We tied up an old rag and we made the best of it until we got further advanced, until we got more money in. I remember my first trip to Derry, up to Waterloo Street to buy a football and a pair of boots. And from there, and I've enjoyed the game right down through the years, both here and in Britain. But I believe as well that soccer and Gaelic can blend together, and we've seen this here in this country. It does. We've got soccer players and Gaelic players, and listening to the Reverend Canon Thornton about the Celtic nation moving forward, I think that's what this whole struggle is about. That our people move forward as one nation, regardless of how they see it, in different outlooks, in different ways. But we're one people, and we're one nation, and we play all the games from all traditions. I think that's what Cockhull community is about. I think that's what Ireland's about. And I must say here now that I know the people personally involved in this Cockhall community in Cockhall Celtic. And every one of them are so dedicated and so determined, even for greater things. And I can assure you that myself, along with Councillor Gill here on the platform, and along with the other councillors as well, everybody involved, we're all in this together, that we will do our best for the Cockhall community. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Eddie. And now we have Councillor.
He never was off the road. His own wife Dinah never seen him. He was that much into the community and the people and doing so much for them. And he really wasn't getting anything for the people. They were entitled to it. That's what he would say. The people was entitled to all this stuff, but he'd only help them to get it, you know. And he'd always say that, I didn't get it to you, I only helped you. He had a lovely way of putting it over that, but they were saying, well, only for you, Eddie. You know, we would not have got it. So he was a people's person. And everybody, there would be queues even at his own door. You know, you couldn't even have a cup of tea in peace. Can you imagine the good woman he had as well to put up with that? She was a very understanding person, Dinah, you know, to even put up with that. And he travelled all over the country to meetings, and he had no phone, there were no mobile phones. And if somebody in Malin had, he always told the story to me now personally, that if he looked for a house for a person and she was in Malin or wherever she was, or him, he would get the house for them. So he said if it was a Fine Gael or a Fianna Fáil or a Labour, one was councillor. They had all secretaries, or they could phone the TDs, and then they would send a letter out to that person, because if the house was passed, if he got the house for them and the house was passed, they would go out and phone their TDs, and they would type out a letter and post that letter to that person. Congratulations, you know, you are awarded this house. So Eddie said it might have come 2 days before he got to that person, and she probably in a caravan with 4 or 5 children. So he would arrive to tell her that she got the house, not knowing that she had a letter maybe the day before, and they would say to him, "They're no good in you coming near me now, because I got a letter yesterday from so and so," you know what I mean? It was their Fine Gael or Fianna Fáil got it for me. And he'd say, "Oh my God," you know. But he'd go on and he'd say, "Well, make me a cup of tea then." So that was his way of going in to explain about how it come about, but he fought for the house for them.
Well, he did, because Eddie had stood in a number of general elections as well, and the vote was building up. You could see that. I think Eddie had built it up to over 2,500, and you could see that the trend was moving in the right direction. Of course, he stood again in the 85 election, council election, and was elected, as was Liam McElhinney. And then we had 2 councillors on the Donegal County Council, which was for us a big step forward. That would mean that when you made a proposal, somebody was there to second it, whereas previously, if Eddie had made a proposal, there was no guarantee that anybody else would second his proposal.
There's a history which hasn't really been told yet, but which any of the older hands will tell you who served on councils, of being excluded from committees, being excluded from the chairs of committees, being denied the right to represent constituents, both in the council that they were elected to, but also if they happened to be part of council delegations. And you know, both Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil, generally speaking, and Labour colluded in that, you know, anything that the unionists did here, they did there, in terms of disenfranchising or trying to disenfranchise that section of the electorate who voted for Sinn Féin. But that was par for the course. You know, we were denied the use of municipal and town hall meetings. we were denied the use of any meeting that the political system had any influence over. And obviously that has there's a sort of a copycat element to that, or a fear element to that. So, you know, if you owned a hotel or some other venue, you might also be loath to hire it out to Sinn Féin because of the special branch would be down on top of you. Harassment was routine, just ongoing harassment by the special branch and by some, and particularly in Donegal, you know, when the Heavy Gang was about, and, you know, the Morris Tribunal into Donegal. I mean, those guard officers who were discredited by their own behaviour and found to be so by the Morris Tribunal. Some of them were also to the forefront in the harassment of Republican activists and Sinn Féin activists. Section 31, you know, we couldn't be interviewed. And there were Donegal examples of that. One of our councillors witnessed a fatal fire in Bundoran or Ballyshannon, but his witness interview of just explaining what he saw couldn't be carried in RTE because he was a Sinn Féin councillor. So it created an atmosphere of fear, of self-isolation, of almost treating people like pariahs. And, you know, Eddie was to the forefront of fighting that in his own place. The difference, I suppose, in the north was that Sinn Féin councillors were also being killed, and then that happened to Eddie.
I got to know Eddie first when our family moved back from England, and my father was about to be released from prison in December 1983, so we moved back in mid-1983 in preparation for that. I was 10 years old, and I would have known him from then. My memories of Eddie during my childhood was just, he was always present in our lives, obviously as a Republican family in Buncrana. Just very kind. This was somebody who just always kind. And then after my father died, over those years ahead, my teenage years, increasingly I was working with him right up, obviously, till the day that he was assassinated. And one thing I'd say about him, you know, because I was obviously a child and then moving into being a teenager, he was really supportive of young people. Like he always felt warmth and empathy. He just had a remarkable, part. And now I'm 47 years old now, looking back on that period, and you appreciate, you know, how important it is to nurture young people and to encourage them and bring them through, and that's just something. He just had a special, he just had a special persona. That's who he was, you know.
Achas coven Leon Eddie agus an turris gach sangarn goji Karen Donny agus I Kurch agus jail and fublucht an sangarn crack sport agus cursi politic ta agus Virginia Abodacora a Yanu Lish. And sin is coven yum an roll a vigum se hain agus an codju a furmi o Eddie agus common na H-blockana Lilling and Stelgokrish. Vi couple of Marshall login agus double module Kelia. G'dam Kierna vi misha ag an amshan bald in foreign in Vlenia. And coven is brona dusa no and la jerna a vi me an akala Eddie agus an sinna Moncrana. Vi me a muncher scola am loan dag me an scola agus hui me gajig Moncrana for our protest and I Kurch Padre go Flynn. Agus an imagination is more and through and through agus farag of Yaram agus mé clúisteil sin scéal le bás Eddie in a bhaile héin among Crana.
I was shot one time, and afterwards I recuperated in a caravan just outside Buncrana. I was looked after by Jim Ferry and by Raymond McLaughlin, Padraig's father, God rest him, and his mother Mary, and by Dinah and by Eddie Fullerton. Myself and Clett were there for a couple of weeks. And the odd time him and Jim Ferry would have brought me for a wee run around the place. He brought me to where the ship on which Wolfe Tone was captured was landed. He brought me to the quay. He brought me to other places of note along that very, very beautiful peninsula.
Eddie campaigned for it non-stop for years. One of the things was the water supply in Buncrana was pretty woeful. In fact, at one stage the water was being cut off on a fairly regular basis because the supply simply wasn't there. And during the summer it was particularly bad. Eddie had been going on for years and years. And one of the big problems was Fruit of Loom was employing massive numbers of people, and they were using a hell of a lot of supply. So Eddie, as far as I remember, it had been going on when I was a young reporter. He was on about it, and he kept going. Anyway, eventually they got the dam. They got the experts in to have a look at it. They went out by the Illies and had a look at it out there. They discovered if they had the right volume of water, if it was dammed properly. And as far as I recall, on the day of Eddie's assassination, the project got the go-ahead. And I can't remember exactly who it was, but someone suggested that it should be named after Eddie, which I think, in view of the fact that he had been the promoter of it by far, I don't think there was anybody else come close in regard to promoting that dam. I was only about right it should be named after him.
The Friday Eddie was murdered, I never seen Eddie so happy. He come home, I left the factory, I come home at dinner time, and Eddie landed and he said to me, we've got the dam passed. He was so happy. And he says, we're going back in now to meet up with other dignitaries. And he was then, that evening, he was going to a Sinn Féin meeting because the elections was due in 3 weeks' time or thereabouts. And he went that evening, he went away to the meeting. And Eddie landed then. Oh, it was late. I can't remember the time now. It must have been around quarter to one, something like that. Early hours of the morning. And Eddie always had his files in the back window of his car. But when he landed home, he always took the files out and brought them into the house. But that particular night he didn't. He come in and he went into the sitting room and he lifted the curtain to look out the window. And he come back into the kitchen. I didn't know he'd done this now till afterwards. And he come back into the kitchen and he says to me, would you make me a sandwich? I was just ready to go to bed. I said, okay, so I made him a sandwich. He put the television on. I said, look, don't sit up now watching that television this time of the morning now. Anyway, I made him a sandwich and I went to bed. And the next I heard was the battering on the door. And Eddie shaking me to get out of the bed. But I didn't know what was going on, what was happening. And I think Eddie pushed me into the wardrobe. I was in the wardrobe anyway. How I got there, I don't know. But I think it would be like Eddie to hide me, kind of. Anyway, there was nothing, no sound, nothing, just a dead silence. And all of a sudden I heard 2 shots. and somebody shouting, "Come on." When I got myself gathered up, the silence was deafening. When I got myself gathered up and come round the bed out onto the landing, Eddie was lying on the landing, covered in blood.
I went round and I knocked up Brian Diamond, and I says, "Brian, Eddie's one after being shot." Left, I says, "I'm going to Buncrana now, so I'll let you know when I get there what the crack is." So headed to Buncrana, stopped at Burt with the guards, stopped at Buncrana with the guards, and then got up to the house then, and we opposite. Everybody was around the house, and I was sad, like, you know. You just didn't expect for Eddie to be shot.
No.
You know, it was.
Yeah, well, he really was going for TD. He was going for TD, and I think their influence he threaded that, because there were no Sinn Féin TD that time, and we knew he would have topped the poll, and he would have been the first TD, Sinn Féin TD in the Dáil.
Between 1989 and 1992, as behind-the-scene efforts were being made to develop the Irish peace process, 9 members of Sinn Féin were assassinated by Unionist death squads. 3 of these people, including Eddie, were prominent Sinn Féin councillors. This targeting campaign was part of a wider strategy to prevent people from joining or indeed supporting Sinn Féin. On the morning of his funeral, thousands of people lined the streets of Buncrana to pay their respects to Cllr Eddie Fullerton.
My other great wish as well is to see a united Ireland as well within the next 10 years. It won't be fully effective, like, you know what I mean? It won't be fully effective until it is complete. You know, because, sorry, looking at it now, like.
In the days following Eddie's murder, the Fullerton family became particularly suspicious about the investigative actions of An Gardaí Síochána. When the family were eventually allowed to return to their home where Eddie was murdered, they discovered evidence left behind by the murder gang which surprisingly hadn't been removed for forensic investigation. In a bizarre twist, the Fullerton family also discovered that notebooks and cassette tapes belonging to Eddie were, however, seized by the guards. Speculation that the murder death squad was acting in collusion with elements of the British Crown forces with impunity quickly became apparent. This was further fuelled when obvious investigative leads weren't pursued by either the RUC or An Gardaí Síochána. The Morris Tribunal later found that 3 senior detectives who had worked on the Eddie Fullerton murder investigation were found to be involved in wider cases of corruption in Donegal. The Fullerton family, supported by Sinn Féin, established the Eddie Fullerton Truth and Justice campaign in an attempt to establish the facts around Eddie's murder. This campaign was energetically led by Eddie's son Albert. Sadly, in a further blow to the Fullerton family, Albert was killed suddenly in a road accident in 2006. The Eddie Fullerton Truth and Justice campaign is continuing the fight to get to the bottom of who assassinated Cllr Eddie Fullerton.
30 years on, where are we at? It's been hard work, but I feel optimistic. I feel really pleased that we've challenged boundaries and we've overcome barriers, and here we are 30 years on. The timing's okay, the timing's good. We have persisted, we've been really, really persistent as a family, and we now have a really good strategic team in place. We have secured legal aid. My mum's taken a case against, in the first part, Mum's has already instigated a case against the Chief Constable of the PSNI, the Northern Ireland Office and the Ministry of Defence. We have to deal with the agent handling and that part of the UDA that was allowed to come in and assassinate Eddie Fullerton in another jurisdiction and get away with it. So we feel quite confident and resilient as a campaign entity to bring this to its conclusion, and we have the right people in place.
Friends, we gathered today to remember Eddie Fullerton on the 30th anniversary of his death. We join Eddie's wife Dinah, his family and his friends in remembering his beautiful and courageous life. A life cruelly cut short when he was assassinated at the age of 56 in his home in Buncrana by the UDA, aided by agents of the British state. The Fullerton family has long called for an independent public inquiry into the circumstances surrounding Eddie's death, and we reiterate that call today in the name of truth and justice. What we do know for certain is that Eddie Fullerton was killed because of what he represented, what he stood for: republicanism, equality, social justice, the unity of his country. Eddie embodied what it means to be a proud Irish Republican activist and a dedicated United Irelander. Everything he did was about making change happen, lifting people up and moving forward. He wanted a better future for his community, for his people, and for his country. He wanted to change Inishowen. He wanted to change Donegal. He wanted to change all of Ireland for the better. Eddie had a natural empathy for the struggles of ordinary people, and he worked day and night to improve their lives. A man with a deep intellect and a sharp political instinct, no part was too big or too small for Eddie Fullerton. Whether it was selling on Fublock outside the pubs, churches and bingo halls of Inishowen, or advancing Republican politics in Donegal County Council, or championing global environmental issues, Eddie Fullerton always had his eye on the bigger picture. He saw each activity as a stepping stone to a united Ireland of equals. Eddie left a powerful legacy that inspires Republicans throughout Ireland to this very day. Part of his legacy is, of course, the political strength that Sinn Féin enjoys in Donegal today. You see, Eddie blazed a trail for today's generation of Republicans. If it wasn't for the strong foundations laid by him and others, Sinn Féin wouldn't have 10 councillors in Donegal, and we wouldn't have our two fantastic TDs, Padraig McLaughlin agus Pearse Doherty. However, while Eddie was a visionary of his time, he also knew if you want real change, you start where you live. His biggest achievement is the Eddie Fullerton Dam and Reservoir, 5 miles from Bruncrana. The supply of water to Inishowen and North Donegal was a major problem that required a solution, and Eddie's ability to listen and to advocate led to that solution. There is no greater legacy than delivering for your people. Eddie Fullerton moved mountains to deliver sustainable, safe and clean water to so many of his people. To quote Padraig McLaughlin, "What a man, what a legacy." If we stand on the shoulders of giants, then Republicans in Donegal and throughout Ireland are standing on the shoulders of Eddie Fullerton. The very best monument we can erect in the memory of Eddie is to continue to work to realise the goals to which he devoted his life. A new and united Ireland is now within our reach. A united Ireland for workers, for families and communities. A united Ireland worthy of the commitment, the work and the sacrifices of our dear fallen comrade, Eddie Fullerton. As long as we hold true to that vision, he will never be forgotten.
So I never met Cllr Eddie Fullerton. I was 6 years old when he was murdered on that awful day. But strange as it seems, he's left a huge legacy on my life, and even growing up in this community, you almost feel like you do know him, because everybody in Buncrana and Weatherfield has stories of Eddie. They've fond reflections of Eddie, and he's held in such a high regard by everybody in this area and throughout the Sinn Féin party throughout Ireland. He's a name that comes up as soon as you say you're from Inishowen. They'll ask about Eddie Fullerton. Do you know the Fullertons? And they'll talk very fondly of him. So I was very conscious when I was asked to be co-opted on replace Padraig to be the Sinn Féin councillor in Inishowen at the time, that was Eddie's seat. Eddie had won that for us in 1979, and I was proud to represent Sinn Féin. I was proud to represent Inishowen, but even heavier was the responsibility that was Eddie Fullerton's seat, and I had to live up to that legacy. So it was extremely emotional when we broke that glass ceiling and we got 3 councillors in, and when Terry Crossan was elected after Albert Doherty had been elected, and the Fullerton family were there and Dinah were there, and we were very conscious that Eddie was smiling down on us, because we were carrying the torch that Eddie had lit for us all those years ago, and all those hard years and all those miles he put in and all those representations he had done to get us where we are. And everything we will do for Sinn Féin in the Inishowen area will be done in Eddie's memory, and we will be building upon the legacy that he built for us so long ago.
Martin McGuinness, who came from just up the road, came from the alleys, at least as Ferns did, and that's where Martin was married, and that's where Martin's parents are buried. So Martin wrote this little poem in tribute to Eddie, and when I was going to look for this, I found out that he recited it at the opening of the Lyric Theatre here in Belfast. And he said it was in testimony to people who build things in places that people thought they couldn't be built in. So this is Martin McGuinness, Fullerton's Dam. Purple heathered hillsides clothe the beady bogs, leaching streams of water, swimming pools for frogs. Down along the glen side a rich brown bean does run to meet and greet another beneath the rising sun. Here below Twin Bridges the Crana springs to life amid kamikaze midges where father found his wife. At Castle Gates Salmo waits out in the swilly blue for destiny and a leaper's spate to bring her home so true. A creature, this is Eddie Fullerton, with an earthy face, decreed his plan would make this folly the perfect place to gather raindrops in a lake.
Eddie Fullerton was a United Islander. He, as I say, that's what he grew up in the morning for, was the Free Ireland, and the way he done it was through his politics. And his tenacity and the fact that he stayed there through thick and thin. You know, we were building here in Donegal for a long number of years, as you know yourself. Eddie was the forward vet there. He was the champion, the carry the flag for us, and he just took everything in the chin. And as I say, he was well got. I have no doubt that had Eddie not been murdered, that he would have been the TD. Without a doubt, he'd have been the TD before we did get the two boys elected.